The police SUV rocked gently as the engine idled, its horn screaming through the dead hush of Salt Creek. Snow fell like dust, thick and blinding, coating everything in sight. It was the kind of storm that made people stay indoors and let the town disappear under a blanket of white, the kind of storm that muffled cries for help. Except this cry didn't stop. 8-year-old Lena Carter tightened the hood of her oversized coat and stood still on the frozen sidewalk. The sound had pulled her off her usual route home from the community library, where she'd stayed too late coloring in the heated kids' corner while her mom finished the closing shift at the diner. She'd heard car horns before, quick, impatient honks, but this one was different, relentless, like something was wrong, really wrong. She clutched the frayed strap of her backpack and squinted down the street. Through the white blur, she saw it, a patrol vehicle, half-mounted on the curb, one tire buried in a snowdrift. The headlights glowed dimly, the hazard lights off. It was angled like someone had lost control or never finished parking. There was no movement around it, no other cars, no sirens, just the ceaseless blare of that horn. Lena's breath came out in small puffs as she stepped closer, boots crunching against icy asphalt. She hesitated 10 feet away. Something about police cars always felt important. Intimidating. Her mom used to say, "If you're ever scared, look for a badge." But what if the badge was the one in trouble? She took another cautious step. Inside, slumped over the steering wheel, was a man. He looked heavy, his body folding toward the dash. She couldn't see much, just the edge of a face, hair dark and damp, and the unmistakable red spreading across the left shoulder of his uniform. Blood. Her chest tightened. She tapped on the glass, her mitten dull against the window. "Sir," she called. Her voice vanished under the scream of the horn. She knocked harder. Nothing. Then came another sound. A low, guttural growl, not threatening but full of urgency. It rose into a sharp bark that made Lena jump. She staggered back, eyes locking on the source. In the back of the SUV, behind a metal grate, stood a German Shepherd large, taut and utterly focused. His fur was black and tan, flecked with snow, and his eyes golden amber stared through her like he was trying to make her understand something urgent. She didn't run. He wasn't snarling. He wasn't trying to scare her. He was asking. The tag on his harness read, "Shadow." Lena stared at him, heart pounding. The dog barked again, shorter this time, then whined, pressing his nose to the grate. His ears twitched, and his body was still muscles coiled not for attack, but for attention. She looked back at the man in the front seat. His face was ghost pale. The side of his jacket was torn, soaked in red. Steam curled faintly off the hood, and the horn continued, endless and shrill. No one else was coming. She checked up and down the street. The corner gas station was dark. The houses nearby were lit, but no one stepped outside. If anyone else had heard the sound, they were ignoring it. Salt Creek was the kind of town that assumed someone else would take care of things. Lena Carter was 8 years old. She had never been in a patrol car. She had never seen a person bleed before. And yet, as the snow soaked into the cuffs of her jeans, she moved toward the driver's door and reached for the handle. It wasn't locked. The door creaked open, letting out a burst of heat metal, leather, and something coppery and sharp. Blood. Lena's stomach turned, but she climbed onto the running board and peeked inside. The man's head was tilted at an awkward angle, lips parted. His badge glinted faintly under the dash light. Officer Mark Delaney, Salt Creek PD. She recognized the name from a school visit months ago. He'd come with his dog and let the second graders pet him. Shadow. This was Shadow. She leaned in, barely brushing the officer's shoulder. His skin was burning hot under his jacket, and he let out a low rasp of breath. He was alive. Her small hand reached out again, and nudged his arm away from the steering wheel. His head lolled to the side, and with it the pressure lifted. The horn stopped. Silence surged in like a flood. Lena stumbled back a step. The absence of sound made her ears ring. For a moment the world froze. Then came a soft whimper from the back. Shadow. She looked at him again. His eyes hadn't left her. She realized then he hadn't barked to scare her. He'd barked to call her. Okay. Lena whispered. Okay. She climbed fully into the SUV, sliding into the seat. Her boots barely reached the edge of the pedals. The interior felt too big, too official, too wrong. But she couldn't think about that now. She stared ahead, and one image flashed in her mind. The green hospital sign on Main Street. She'd seen it before on the school bus. Salt Creek Memorial, just past the park. 2 miles. She swallowed hard. Then she did something she had never done before. She reached for the gear shift. Shadow barked once, sharp and approving, as if confirming what had to happen next. And with one trembling hand still gripping the wheel, and the other reaching toward the ignition, Lena Carter, age 8, decided she wouldn't wait for help. She would drive. The horn had stopped, but Lena's heartbeat hadn't. It pounded against her ribs like it wanted out, like it knew what she was about to do was impossible. She sat frozen in the driver's seat of the police SUV, the warmth of the interior air brushing against her cold, numbed cheeks. Outside, the snow kept falling, wrapping Salt Creek in a silence so heavy it felt like the whole town had forgotten to breathe. Behind her, a sharp whine broke through the hush. Lena turned, eyes meeting the steady gaze of the German shepherd behind the grate. He was big, much bigger than she remembered from the classroom visit months ago, but there was no fear this time. No growl, no threat, only that gaze. Amber eyes, alert and unreadable, locked on hers with a kind of intensity that didn't need words. Shadow didn't bark. He didn't pace. He waited. Lena twisted in the seat and pressed both knees up to turn fully towards him. The divider between them was solid metal below and wire mesh above. The dog's muzzle was pushed through the largest square of the grate. His nose twitched, sniffing the air near her face, like he needed to check if she was real. "I'm not supposed to be here," she whispered. The dog tilted his head just slightly. "I don't know how to drive." Still nothing from him. No movement, just that slow, steady breath. Lena noticed the way his shoulders rose and fell, not fast, not panicked. Calm, measured, the kind of breathing you see in people who aren't afraid. It made her own lungs loosen, just a little. She edged closer, reaching up to the grate. Her gloved fingers brushed the cold metal. Shadow leaned forward and touched his nose to the tip of her mitten. Then he licked it. Not a slobbery lick, just a single, slow swipe. Like approval. She exhaled hard, her breath hitching at the end. The moment hit her deeper than she expected, not because it was sweet, but because it felt like a signal. He wasn't just tolerating her, he was accepting her. A voice crackled from the dash. "Unit 42, respond. Officer Delaney, status check. Salt Creek dispatch to Unit 42. Lena jumped, eyes darting to the radio. A red light blinked with each call. Unit 42, shots reported in Warehouse District. Officer down. Any nearby units respond. Her fingers fumbled toward the mic but stopped short. She didn't know how it worked, didn't know if she was even allowed to touch it. She looked at Officer Delaney, still unconscious, his chest barely rising. His skin looked paler now, damp. The blood had started to pool along the seat fabric. The radio crackled again. Dispatch to Unit 42, please respond. Possible 10 to 33, repeat, possible officer down. Lena swallowed hard. Her pulse roared in her ears. No one was coming. Shadow let out a low rumble, not angry, more like frustration. She turned back to him. His front paws were pressed against the cage now, claws curled around the edge of the metal. He barked once. Short, urgent. "I heard," she said softly. "I know." The blizzard outside was building. The windows fogged at the corners, and ice feathered along the edges of the windshield. If anyone was out there, they couldn't see the vehicle anymore. The world was closing in. Lena reached into her pocket and pulled out a scrap of paper, an old school bus map she had once stuffed there and forgotten. She opened it slowly with trembling hands. There it was. Salt Creek Memorial. A blue hospital symbol stamped 2 miles from the spot she now sat. The main road curved straight through the old town square, then past the post office and up a hill. She could picture it. She'd ridden that road. Every kid in town had. But she'd never driven it. Not in a snowstorm, not in a full-size patrol SUV. She turned back to Shadow, her breath quickening. "If I get it wrong." The dog leaned forward again, pressing his nose against the grate like punctuation. Then he barked twice, controlled, clear. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Lena turned in her seat and settled back behind the wheel. She adjusted the seatbelt, pulling it tight across her chest. It cut high against her neck, but she didn't care. Her hands returned to the steering wheel. Cold, oversized, heavy. Shadow stayed at the grate, watching her every movement. She looked over at Officer Delaney, whose head was now sagging slightly to the right. His body had shifted in the seat, dangerously close to slumping forward again. "I need him to stay still," she murmured. There was a soft shuffle from the back. Shadow had dropped down. Then, with practiced ease, he braced his back against the divider and pressed one shoulder forward, nudging Delaney's head gently against the headrest. It wasn't forceful, just enough pressure to stop the officer from slipping again. Lena's mouth dropped open. You've done this before, haven't you?" Shadow didn't react. He didn't need to. His body said everything. She stared at him, a strange calm settling into her chest. It wasn't courage exactly. More like something borrowed, something shared. The engine hummed quietly beneath her, already running. The gear shift was in park. The radio flared again. "Dispatch to all units." Officer Delaney unresponsive. Last known location, Briar and Elm. Lena touched the gear shift. Shadow let out a low, steady breath. Her hand tightened, then moved. She pulled the shifter down to D. The SUV gave a soft jerk. Her foot hovered over the brake, then gently pressed. The car rolled forward an inch. Another. The road was slick, but the tires held. From the back seat, Shadow barked once. Not loud, not scared, just ready. Lena Carter was no longer just a kid who found a police car. Now she was the only one in Salt Creek, still trying to save a life. And she wasn't alone. Lena's fingers trembled as she reached across Officer Delaney's slumped body. The wheel pressed into his chest, setting off the horn again. Loud, shrill, relentless. She flinched, heart hammering, the sound slicing through her like a blade. It was the kind of noise you couldn't think through, the kind that said something's wrong and made the whole world tilt. She braced her knees against the edge of the seat and leaned in, gripping his shoulder with both hands. His skin felt hot, the fabric of his uniform soaked and stiff with blood. His weight didn't budge easily, but she pushed again, this time with her full body. His head rolled slightly, and with that tiny shift, the pressure on the steering wheel released. The horn cut off. Silence dropped like a stone. Lena froze, breathing hard. She hadn't realized how much the sound had gotten inside her, scraping at her nerves, making her hands too shaky to trust. Now, the sudden quiet rang in her ears like static. She looked at Officer Delaney's face. His eyes were still shut, jaw slack. He didn't stir. A low thump from behind broke the silence. Shadow. She turned. The German Shepherd had pressed his body against the cage again, staring forward. His breath fogged the grate. No bark, no sound, just waiting. Like he'd been doing this his whole life. "Okay," Lena whispered. Her voice barely made it past her lips. "I'll try." She slid into the seat, her boots squeaking on the rubber floor mat. The gear shift stood tall beside her, intimidating in its simplicity. She touched it, just for a second, then pulled her hand away like it might shock her. This was a police car. This was illegal. This was insane. But nobody else was doing anything. Nobody even knew he was out here. 2 miles, she told herself. Just 2. She could walk that distance in 25 minutes, but not with a man bleeding in the front seat. And not in a blizzard that was only getting worse. Her hand drifted to the steering wheel. It was cold and massive in her grip, like holding onto a tire. She took a breath. 2 miles, she said aloud, trying to believe it. Shadow barked once, sharp, commanding, not fear confirmation. Her spine straightened. The key was still in the ignition. Lena reached for it, fingers curling around the cold metal. She turned it. The SUV rumbled to life. Dashboard lights flickered. A soft chime echoed. The vehicle felt like a beast waking up under her, alive and heavy. She swallowed down the panic. The gear was still in drive. Her foot hovered over the brake, unsure. She pressed it hard and the SUV stayed still. Good. So far, so good. Outside the windshield, the town was disappearing. The storm thickened by the minute. Snow whipped sideways, turning traffic lights into blurs of color behind veils of frost. She couldn't see the road anymore, only vague outlines, lamp posts, stop signs, buildings she recognized from walking to school. Lena adjusted in the seat, sliding forward until her toes brushed the pedals. The seatbelt cut awkwardly across her neck. She buckled it anyway. Shadow shifted again. In the rear cage, he crouched lower, muscles tensed. His eyes followed her every move. "I'm gonna need you," she said. He blinked once. With a breath that tasted like rubber and fear, Lena lifted her foot off the brake. The SUV nudged forward, rolling just inches before she tapped it again. The lurch made her heart leap into her throat. She gritted her teeth. She couldn't cry, couldn't panic. Not now. Mark Delaney groaned beside her. A faint, guttural sound, not quite awake, but not gone either. She turned to him. "We're going to get you help," she whispered. "I promise." His head lolled toward her slightly, but he didn't respond. She faced forward again. The first intersection was coming up. She recognized it, a 4-way stop just before the old fire station. The street signs were almost covered in snow, the red octagon barely visible through the swirl. Lena crept forward. Her hands gripped the wheel so tight her knuckles ached. Her breath fogged the inside of the windshield, and she wiped it with her sleeve. She slowed too much. The SUV shuddered, then stalled. "No, no, no," she hissed. She turned the key again. The engine roared back to life. Shadow let out a low growl, not anger. Urgency. His head turned toward the left side of the vehicle, ears twitching. Lena looked. Headlights. A pickup truck was coming fast. Too fast. It wasn't stopping. Instinct screamed in her chest. She slammed her foot down. The SUV leapt forward. Tires spun briefly on the snow before catching traction. The pickup skidded past the rear bumper, horn blaring, driver's arm waving wildly out the window. Lena didn't look back. Her body trembled all over. Her ears rang. Her hands were slick with sweat inside her gloves. She whispered, "I can't do this." Shadow barked once. Not loud, but enough. She didn't know what the bark meant exactly, but it gave her something to hold on to. Lena pressed the gas gently. The SUV rolled forward again, past the fire station, onto the stretch that led to Main Street. She adjusted the wheel with tiny jerks. Every block felt like a mile. She had never seen the world from behind a steering wheel before. Everything looked taller, closer, like it was leaning toward her, waiting to crush her if she made a mistake. Snow blew sideways across the windshield. The wipers thudded rhythmically, pushing back the storm only for it to return seconds later. 1/2 mile down. 1.5 to go. She glanced in the rearview mirror. Shadow still stood at attention, tail low, gaze forward. Lena faced the road again and whispered, "Just keep breathing." But what she meant was, "Don't stop moving." Salt Creek Memorial glowed somewhere out there behind the snow, and Lena Carter, age 8, was driving toward it with a bleeding cop beside her and a K9 in the back who hadn't left his post, not for a second. Snow hammered the windshield, erasing the world inch by inch. Lena leaned forward in the driver's seat, squinting through the blurry smear of white, her face pale with concentration. She gripped the wheel with both hands, knuckles white, arms trembling from effort. Every gust of wind made the SUV sway, as if the storm wanted to push them off the road entirely. Her breath came in shallow bursts. The inside of the vehicle was warm, but sweat beaded at her temples. The defroster wheezed as it battled the cold, trying to reclaim the windows. She didn't dare go faster than 10 miles per hour. But even that felt like she was hurtling through chaos. Behind her, Shadow shifted in the cage. Then, in one fluid motion, he climbed over the seat partition and wedged himself into the narrow space between the back and the front. He landed on the passenger seat, thick paws steady, eyes fixed on Officer Delaney. The officer had begun to slump again, his head dipping sideways toward the gear shift. Blood stained the shoulder of his uniform darker now, spreading. His breathing was ragged, shallow. Every bump in the road jostled him further forward. Shadow moved fast. He braced one paw against the center console and gently pressed his shoulder against Delaney's chest, shifting his weight just enough to hold the man upright. Lena glanced sideways. She couldn't speak. The dog looked like a living brace, a medical assistant in fur and muscle. His head was level with Delaney's face, his breath calm and measured. In the stormlight, his eyes were steady and alert, scanning the windshield just like hers. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracked. The SUV crept forward. Visibility dropped with each block. Streetlights blurred like smudges on glass. Headlights were nothing but dull halos. The wipers smeared ice and slush into arcs, barely clearing her view. Still, she kept driving. Then it came. Fast. Sudden. A pair of lights appeared in front of her, too close, too fast. A delivery truck. Its tires shrieked as it skidded into the wrong lane, fishtailing through the intersection. The roar of the engine and the blare of the horn slammed into her senses all at once. Lena screamed and yanked the wheel. The SUV slid sideways. Tires screamed. The back end fishtailed. Her boot jammed the brake, then instinct made her pump it soft, quick jabs. The truck missed them by inches, wind rushing past like a slap. The SUV bucked again, swerving back into the lane. She gritted her teeth, gripping the wheel so hard it felt like her bones might snap. Shadow let out a deep, rumbling growl, not panic, not alarm. It vibrated through the cab like a warning, like a hand on her shoulder telling her to hold steady. Lena's chest heaved, her eyes burned. She blinked back tears that had come without her knowing, the kind that burst forward when you're just trying to stay alive. Her hands shook, her knees bounced uncontrollably. I can't do this." Shadow didn't look at her. He didn't need to. His body stayed pressed against Delaney, unmoving. He was a statue of calm, a fortress of fur and focus. And that growlet was still there, low and constant. Not meant to scare. Meant to center. Lena blinked again. A memory surfaced. She was 5, sitting in her dad's old pickup. He smelled like gasoline and cheap coffee. The truck had been parked in their gravel driveway, and he let her sit in the driver's seat, fingers wrapped around the cracked leather wheel. "If it ever slides," he'd said, slurring slightly, "don't panic. Tap the brake. Cars hate panic." Then he laughed. She'd laughed too, even though she didn't know why. Her dad had left 3 months after that. But the lesson stuck. Tap the brake. Don't panic. Cars hate panic. She whispered it now, over and over. Tap the brake. Don't panic. She adjusted her grip, wiped her sleeve across her nose, and sat up straighter. The hospital was still a mile away. The longest mile of her life. She leaned into the wheel again, watching for shadows through the snow. Storefronts, mailboxes, fire hydrants, every landmark blurred and buried. Her world was shrinking to headlights and instinct. Then came the hill, the one behind the town square. It didn't look steep when you walked it, but under a foot of snow, in a patrol SUV too big for her feet, it might as well have been a mountain. The engine growled as she pressed the gas. The SUV bucked once, tires spinning. She tapped, waited, tried again. They crawled forward. Delaney groaned beside her, his head swaying. Shadow leaned harder, pressing the officer back into place. His paw shifted to anchor on the dashboard. He didn't bark. He didn't flinch. He adjusted like a teammate who knew his role. Halfway up, the back tires began to spin again. Lena fought the urge to slam the pedal. She feathered it instead, the way her dad had taught her. Flickers of pressure. Enough to move, not enough to slide. The SUV groaned, rose another foot. Shadow gave a single huff, approving. They crested the hill. Lena gasped. Her lungs burned. Her hands were locked in place. The road stretched ahead of them now, just a few blocks. Somewhere in that whiteout, the hospital glowed behind frost-covered glass. Then the static returned. The radio crackled to life. "Dispatch to Unit 42. Officer Delaney. Do you copy? Warehouse District. Suspect fled on foot." The rest dissolved. Lena stared at the dash. She didn't understand all the codes, but she understood enough. Officer Delaney had been ambushed. He'd been responding to something violent, something that had left him bleeding in the street. And she'd been the one to find him. She blinked hard, clearing her eyes. Shadow turned his head, just enough to check on her, then turned back. He didn't need thanks. He just needed her to keep going. So she did. The road finally leveled out, and there it was. Through the veil of white, the faint blue-green glow of the hospital sign flickered into view, like a lighthouse fighting through fog. Lena gasped, tears pricking at her eyes before she even realized they were there. She blinked hard and leaned into the wheel, guiding the SUV past the last intersection. The red letters above the sliding glass doors read, "Salt Creek Memorial Emergency." They shimmered against the swirling snow, like they belonged in another world. "We made it," she whispered. But the storm wasn't finished. As the SUV rolled toward the emergency lane, a fresh gust slammed against them from the right. The tires lost grip. Lena's foot jammed the brake. Too hard. The vehicle skidded sideways. Shadow growled sharply, his whole body shifting to brace both Delaney and himself. Lena yanked the wheel instinctively, hands slick with sweat. The rear tires fishtailed. The SUV jerked again, then slammed to a stop, the front bumper landing just inches from the emergency bay doors. Everything went still. Inside the SUV, the only sounds were Lena's ragged breaths and the tick of the cooling engine. Then chaos exploded. The sliding doors burst open. A team in scrubs spilled out into the storm. Flashlight beams cut through the snow. One of them, a tall black woman in her 40s, shouted towards the others. "That's a patrol unit," she barked. "Get the gurney." Now Dr. Nina Roberts moved like someone born for chaos. Her dark hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her voice carried with authority sharpened by too many long nights in trauma. She reached the driver's side first, yanking open the door. What she saw stopped her cold. An 8-year-old girl, cheeks flushed with cold, hands locked on the steering wheel. Eyes wide but not wild, controlled, intent. "Are you hurt?" Roberts asked. Lena shook her head. "He needs help." Please, Roberts didn't waste another second. She turned to the approaching staff. "It's Delaney." "Officer Delaney. He's hit bad behind her." A male nurse rushed in with the stretcher. Kyle Mendoza, early 30s, Latino, compact frame, the kind of guy who never panicked but never joked in a crisis either. He opened the passenger door and froze. The dog was standing on the seat, between the bleeding officer and anyone who might come too close. Dr. Roberts?" Kyle's voice wavered. "We've got a situation." Roberts came around the hood and stopped. Shadow stood tall, body tense, tail stiff. He didn't growl, he didn't bark, he simply looked, straight at her. He stayed planted between Mark Delaney's barely breathing body and the incoming hands, his head level with the stretcher, his chest rising and falling in rhythm with the man he refused to leave. Roberts didn't flinch. She crouched slowly, holding his gaze. "Easy, Shadow," she said softly. "You're doing your job. You brought him here. Let us do ours." Shadow stared for another second. Then, as if reading something in her voice, he stepped back just enough to give them space. Lena watched it all from behind the wheel, her hand still on the leather. Her body felt numb, not from the cold, but from the release. The sheer exhaustion. She'd made it, but she didn't feel victorious. She felt empty. The back door opened, and someone reached in to help her out. She stumbled as her feet hit the ground, legs shaky, knees locked. The snow hit her face like needles. She turned just in time to see them lift Officer Delaney onto the stretcher. His arm slid off the edge. Shadow lunged forward, not in alarm, but in correction. He pressed his nose to Delaney's arm and then moved alongside the stretcher like a shadow returning to form. Kyle blinked, stepping back. "He's following?" "He's guarding," Roberts said. "Let him." The medical team surged forward into the warmth of the E. The doors closed behind them. Lena stood alone in the falling snow, hands at her sides. The moment hit her like a wave. Her legs buckled. She dropped to her knees. The white around her blurred. She felt a nose nudge her hand. Shadow. He'd come back. He pressed his body against her side, firm and unmoving. She curled her fingers into his thick fur and leaned in, burying her face against him. No words. Just breath. And the thump of his heart. Solid. Constant inside, the fluorescent lights of Salt Creek Memorial buzzed. Outside, in the blizzard, an 8-year-old girl and a battle-worn K-9 sat together on the frozen ground. Neither of them moved. Not until they knew Mark Delaney had a chance. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. The hospital waiting room was nearly empty, the kind of quiet space where time stretched and breaths echoed too loud. Lena sat curled on the vinyl bench near the trauma wing doors, her knees pulled up to her chest. Her parka was still damp from the snow, leaving a dark ring on the seat beneath her. She didn't care. Shadow lay pressed against her legs, his large frame a wall of warmth and calm. His head rested on her boot, and every so often his eyes flicked up to check on her. He hadn't left her side since they'd come in. No leash, no commands, just presence. She had stopped crying a while ago. Now she just sat there, still, silent, holding on. Inside the double doors, the trauma team worked on Officer Delaney. The words Dr. Roberts had called over her shoulder still played on repeat in Lena's head. Massive blood loss. Let's move, and then the doors had swallowed them all. No one had come to talk to her yet. A nurse had brought her a juice box, but it still sat unopened on the small table beside her. Her hands were too tightly wrapped in Shadow's fur to do anything else. She didn't know how long she sat like that. Minutes, maybe hours. Time had blurred the edges. Then the doors opened. Dr. Nina Roberts stepped into the hall, pulling off her gloves with slow, practiced movements. Her scrubs were wrinkled, the front stained faintly with blood, and her forehead glistened with sweat. But her eyes held something different now, relief. Lena stood before she realized her legs had moved. Shadow followed instantly, standing beside her like armor. Dr. Roberts walked over and crouched to Lena's eye level. "He's stable," she said, voice low, calm. The bullet missed the artery by less than half an inch. We stopped the bleeding, and he's breathing on his own. Lena's lips trembled. Her eyes filled again, uninvited. "You saved his life," Roberts added, her voice steady but full. Without you getting him here when you did, he wouldn't have made it." Lena shook her head hard. "It wasn't just me." It was Shadow. He stayed with him. He helped hold him up. Dr. Roberts turned to the dog. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then, with a hand still gloved, she reached out and gently touched Shadow's head. "Then I guess we owe both of you," she said. "You two make one hell of a team." That was all it took. Lena's knees buckled, and she sat back on the bench with a soft thud. The sobs came quietly this time, shoulders trembling, face buried in her hands. Shadow moved closer and nudged her elbow, then slowly pressed his head into her side. When she didn't move, he licked her hand once. Just once. Firm. Grounding. Dr. Roberts stood and gave her space. The doors opened again a few minutes later. This time, the man who walked in didn't wear scrubs. He wore a heavy department-issued overcoat, the kind lined with Kevlar. Salt Creek Police Department badge on one side, a silver bar of rank on the other. Ray Sutherland, police chief, 57 years old, built like an oak tree that had survived too many winters. His hair was white now, cropped close, and his moustache made him look sterner than he was. But his eyes, steel grey, missed nothing. He stopped when he saw Lena. Shadow raised his head, ears alert but relaxed. "You Lena Carter?" Sutherland asked, voice low and even. She nodded, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "You drove Officer Delaney here?" She nodded again. I didn't know what else to do. Shadow sat beside her now, upright and alert, like the question had been his too. Sutherland glanced down at the dog, then slowly lowered himself onto the bench opposite her. "I've seen a lot in this job," he said, resting his elbows on his knees. "But I've never seen anything like that." He paused. "You're 8 years old, right?" "Yes, sir." "You've never driven a car before?" "No, sir." "And you chose to climb behind the wheel of a police SUV in a snowstorm with an unconscious officer and drive 2 miles through town to this hospital?" She bit her lip. It felt like someone had to. Ray let that hang in the air. Then he looked at Shadow. "And you?" "You backed her up the whole way." Shadow didn't bark. He didn't wag his tail. He just held the chief's gaze. "That's what I thought." Ray muttered, then leaned back with a soft exhale. He took out a small notebook. "I'm going to need a quick statement from you, all right?" "Just the basics, but I want you to know no one's in trouble. You did something extraordinary." She nodded slowly. "And we're not calling the press," he added. "Not unless you or your mum say so. What happened tonight? That's your story to tell, when and if you're ready." She looked down at Shadow. His ears twitched. "I don't want the news to find us," she said. "Not yet." Sutherland stood, closing his notebook without writing a word. "Then they won't." He looked at her again, more carefully this time. "We don't often see bravery like yours. Most grown men would have panicked. You didn't." "I was scared," she said. "That's not the same thing." Shadow leaned against her again, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Lena let herself lean back, too. Just for a moment. She was safe. Mark Delaney was alive, and Shadow was still watching the door. The soft beeping of machines filled the room. It was rhythmic, like a metronome keeping time with life itself. Tubes ran from the machines to the bed, where Officer Mark Delaney lay beneath crisp hospital sheets. His shoulder was wrapped in thick gauze, and his skin, though pale, no longer held that terrifying grey tinge. Outside the window, the storm had finally eased. Morning sunlight broke through thin clouds and lit the room with a muted, forgiving glow. Shadow was the first to move. He'd been lying quietly at the foot of the hospital bed, head on his front paws, ears twitching at every change in heart monitor tones. When Delaney stirred just the faintest twitch of fingers, Shadow's head came up fast. He rose silently, took 2 slow steps, and rested his front paws gently on the edge of the bed. Delaney's eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. His eyes were glassy, unfocused at first, but then they locked on the shape hovering at the edge of the mattress. His voice came out hoarse, cracked from the oxygen and trauma, but full of something deeper than pain. "Shadow?" The dog pressed his nose to Delaney's forearm. The man exhaled a sound that was half breath, half sob. His hand, slow and shaking, lifted to touch the shepherd's thick neck. "You stayed," Delaney whispered. Shadow didn't move. He didn't whine. He simply leaned his weight against the mattress, letting Delaney feel every ounce of his presence. Dr. Roberts had been waiting outside. She walked in quietly, clipboard in hand, and stopped just short of the bed. "You're awake," she said softly. "Good." "You gave us a hell of a scare," Delaney tried to speak again, but coughed. Roberts handed him a cup of water, helped him sip. Where am I?" "Salt Creek Memorial. You were brought in last night. Bullet grazed your subclavian artery, but we caught it in time." He closed his eyes again. "Dispatch, warehouse. I didn't call it in, no," she said. "But someone else did your job for you." Delaney frowned. Then Roberts turned and gestured to the doorway. Lena stepped in. Her shoes were too big, borrowed hospital slippers. Her clothes had been dried and folded overnight. Her hair was combed, but still frizzy at the edges. She looked smaller than he remembered, more real. He stared. "You," he rasped. She nodded, stepping closer. "I saw the SUV, and the horn, and Shadow. You weren't moving," Delaney's jaw trembled. "You drove me here?" "She did," Dr. Roberts confirmed. "Through a whiteout. 2 miles. No one else knew where you were." Delaney's eyes flooded. He reached for her hand. His grip was weak, but firm enough to tell her that what she'd done mattered. "I owe you my life," he said. "Both of you." Shadow huffed, just once, as if to punctuate the point. Then Lena added, almost shyly, "He told me what to do." Kind of Dr. Roberts smiled. He didn't bark much. But when he did, she listened. Delaney wiped at his eyes, his breath catching in his chest. "I never leave him behind," he said. "But last night, I didn't protect him. He protected me." Shadow rested his head on the bed again, nose pressed into Delaney's hip. The machines beeped on. After a long pause, Delaney looked at Dr. Roberts. "I want to see her mum." That afternoon, the hospital discharged Lena under temporary supervision into Delaney's care, per protocol until her mother could be reached. But Lena insisted on waiting at the hospital until her mum got off work. Angela Carter arrived just before dusk. She came through the front doors of Salt Creek Memorial, with her coat zipped to her chin and her eyes scanning the room like a soldier checking a battlefield. She was 34, wiry and sharp-eyed. Her diner apron stuck out from under her coat, dusted in flour and tired hours. When she spotted Lena sitting beside a uniformed officer and a massive dog, she didn't blink. She marched straight across the lobby. "Are you Mark Delaney?" she asked, hands tight at her sides. "I am. You're the one who let my daughter drive a police vehicle through a snowstorm." Delaney blinked. "Technically, I was unconscious." Angela narrowed her eyes. "She saved my life." He added, voice calm. "Your daughter is the reason I'm sitting here talking to you." Angela's shoulders softened. She glanced down at Lena, who was suddenly very interested in Shadow's ear. "She told me some of it on the phone." Angela said, "I didn't believe half of it." "You should believe all of it." Delaney said, "She didn't panic. She listened to your voice in her head the whole time." And to him he nodded at Shadow, who stood beside Lena like a guardian carved from oak. Angela finally crouched, brushing hair from Lena's face. "You okay, baby?" Lena nodded. "I wasn't brave the whole time." "You didn't have to be." Just long enough Delaney cleared his throat. "Ms. Carter, I know this is a lot. But when I get discharged, I'd like to bring you both dinner." As a thank you, Angela straightened, skeptical. "You want to bring us dinner? I'd like to know the girl who saved me. And meet the woman who raised her." Angela looked at Shadow. He met her gaze without flinching. She smiled, the smallest smile. "You feed that dog steak, we'll talk?" Delaney grinned for the first time since waking up. "Deal." And in that moment beneath hospital lights, surrounded by quiet machines and tired footsteps, 3 people and a dog who didn't know they were becoming a family stood side by side. Shadow let out a long breath and didn't move from his post. 3 weeks after the snowstorm, the Salt Creek Police Department's front doors swung open and Mark Delaney walked through them upright, healing, and changed. His left arm was still stiff, the tendons not quite trusting themselves yet, but he was back. Not to the same beat, not to the same rhythm, but back with a different kind of clarity. Shadow moved beside him in perfect sync, head high, stride purposeful, as if he'd never been away. The squad room quieted for a moment as officers glanced up from their desks. Someone muttered, "He's back." Another, "That's the dog." But no one said it like gossip. It was reverence. Captain Linda Hooper stepped out of her office, arms crossed over a navy wool sweater. Mid-50s, sharp-minded, and tougher than any man in the building, she gave Delaney a long look before cracking a rare half-smile. "You're supposed to take 6 weeks," she said. "Turns out I'm not good at sitting still." Delaney replied, "I figured." "Come on in inside the office." Shadow curled beside the desk without being told. His gaze followed the conversation, his ears alert. Hooper poured coffee from a dented thermos and passed it to Delaney without asking if he wanted it. "So," she said, "you made it back from the grave." "Everyone wants a quote. Let them want it," Delaney said. She raised an eyebrow. "Not even the local paper?" He shook his head. "That story isn't mine to tell." Hooper leaned forward. "Then what do you want?" Delaney slid a folded packet from his coat pocket and placed it on her desk. "I want to start a new K9 initiative, one that doesn't just chase suspects." She opened the folder. "The K9 Community Program." She read aloud. He nodded. "Kids like Lena Carter walk home alone every day. Some go through alleys, some pass construction zones, most don't get noticed." Hooper flipped through the proposal, sketches of routes, safety zones, dog patrol pairings. "And you want to assign trained K9S to after-school foot patrols?" "Not just patrols. Presence," he said. "Visibility. Community reassurance." Shadow walks Lena home now. Just shows up near the corner at 3:10, waits outside the school like he belongs there. She doesn't need to look over her shoulder anymore. Hooper looked up. "You're proposing we formalize that?" "Yes. You realize what kind of liability language this will take?" I'll help write it. Hooper stared at him. Why now? Delaney glanced down at Shadow. Because there are quiet kids who save lives. And dogs who never leave your side. And maybe we need to meet them where they are instead of just answering 911 calls. Hooper closed the folder and leaned back in a chair. I'll run it up the chain. But Delaney, if this becomes a media circus, the whole program dies before it begins. It won't. He stood, hand brushing the dog's back. Shadow rose instantly, body taut and ready. As they left, Hooper added, Tell her she has a ride any time. No badge needed 2 weeks later, Shadow stood outside Salt Creek Elementary at exactly 3:10. Lena Carter walked out, her backpack slung low and a peanut butter sandwich barely eaten in her hand. She spotted him instantly. Shadow didn't bark. He didn't need to. She walked to him and scratched behind his ears. Hey, partner. They turned together and started toward home. It became a routine. Every afternoon, without fail, Shadow met her outside school and walked the 6 blocks home. Neighbors took notice. Drivers slowed when they saw the patrol K9. Some waved. Lena never waved back, but she smiled at Shadow, and that was enough. Word got out, but not through headlines. A few parents asked. Some teachers nodded knowingly. Officer Delaney declined all interviews. Angela Carter refused any contact from reporters, and Lena asked only one thing of the department. Don't put it online. So they didn't. There was no viral video, no plaque, no press release. But there was a new sign posted at Salt Creek Elementary, laminated and zip-tied to the chain-link fence. Canine Patrol Zone, safety walks in pairs. Shadow stood beneath it, tail still, eyes scanning the street. A different kind of partner now, one who didn't just serve. He stayed. The Salt Creek Town Hall hadn't seen a full crowd in years. Rows of folding chairs filled the old gymnasium-style room, creaking beneath the weight of neighbors who rarely had a reason to gather. Yellowing portraits of past mayors lined the wood-paneled walls. Above the small stage, a hand-painted banner stretched across the back curtain. Honoring Our Own. Salt Creek Citizen Courage Award. The podium stood at the center, flanked by 2 flags and a pair of high-beam stage lights that buzzed faintly in the warm air. Off to the side, Lena Carter waited with Shadow sitting pressed against her leg. Her shoes tapped softly on the wooden floor, not from nerves exactly, but something else, something heavier. Shadow didn't move. His breath rose and fell in slow, even rhythm. Still guarding. Always guarding. Angela Carter stood in the wings, hands clasped in front of her, watching her daughter with a face that flickered between pride and quiet worry. Mark Delaney was seated near the front row, arm in a sling, but looking stronger than he had in weeks. He kept his eyes on Shadow and Lena like nothing else in the room mattered. Beside him, Chief Sutherland sat straight-backed in full dress uniform, his hat tucked under his arm. The mayor approached the mic. He was a thin man in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit across the shoulders. His voice echoed through the room like someone reading a bedtime story through a loudspeaker. "This town has always been quiet," he began, "and sometimes we take that for granted. But it took a child, a police officer, and one remarkable dog to remind us that courage doesn't always come with warning." "All right," he gestured toward Lena. She didn't ask for attention. She didn't seek it out. But when no one else knew where to look, she found a way forward through fear, through snow, through uncertainty. Murmurs of agreement rippled across the audience. And so, for the first time in our town's history, we present the Citizen Courage Award to Miss Lena Carter. Applause filled the room, not loud or theatrical, but respectful, earnest, a kind of clapping that didn't just celebrate, it acknowledged. Lena stepped forward. Shadow rose with her, and walked beside her up the short steps to the stage. She stopped just shy of the microphone. Shadow sat at her feet. Lena glanced toward her mom, then toward Delaney. She took a breath. "I didn't want to be here," she said. Silence fell instantly. "I don't like talking in front of people. I didn't think what I did was brave." She paused. "I just saw a man who needed help, and a dog who wouldn't leave him." She looked down at Shadow. "I wasn't brave." Shadow was. "I just listened." There was no applause at first, only a few soft exhales. Then someone stood. It was Delaney, one arm in a sling, eyes damp. He clapped slowly, and the others followed. Lena stepped back from the mic. Shadow moved with her. No camera flashes, no reporters pushing in. The town had honored her request. No press. Just people. The mayor returned to the podium, his voice a little softer now. "Lena asked us not to make this a big story. She didn't want cameras or newspapers, so we won't. But let tonight live in this room, in our hands, in our memory." As the applause died down, the lights dimmed, leaving only the glow of the spotlights above the stage. Lena sat on the edge, legs swinging slightly, her dress shoes scuffed at the toes. Shadow lay at her feet, chin resting across his front paws, eyes watching the room. The final moment settled over them like snow falling on still ground. No music, no speeches, just a girl, a dog, and the kind of silence that meant something had changed. Shadow lifted his head, ears twitching. Lena reached down, placed a hand on his neck, and scratched softly. The crowd began to file out slowly. No one rushed. No one spoke above a whisper. As the stage lights dimmed to a soft amber, one photo was taken quietly from the back of the room. It wouldn't be posted. It wouldn't go viral. It would sit on a community bulletin board beneath a handwritten caption. She didn't bark for glory. She just listened. Shadow didn't bark either. But he stayed. There were no sirens the day Mark signed the papers. No ceremony, no ribbon cutting, no headlines. Just a quiet Thursday morning, a half-empty mug of black coffee, and a ballpoint pen that barely worked. The officer behind the desk pushed the adoption form forward with a half-smile. "You sure about this?" she asked, eyes flicking between the form and the German shepherd sitting perfectly still at Mark's heel. Mark looked down. Shadow didn't flinch. His gaze locked forward, ears half-perked. Waiting, as always. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Mark said, and signed. The paperwork didn't change much in Shadow's daily routine. He still rode in the patrol car when Mark went out on community rounds. He still walked Lena home from school every Thursday when Angela worked the late shift. And he still curled up in the exact same spot at the foot of Mark's bed, exhaling like a soldier off duty. But something in the house felt different after that day. Lighter, more certain. A week later, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a wooden plaque, hand-carved, smooth along the edges. On it, in burned-in block letters. He didn't bark for glory. He barked for home. Beneath the quote was a photo printed on matte paper. A snapshot. Lena, Shadow, and Mark sitting on the front porch bench of the little yellow house on Hillside Avenue. Mark wore a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearms. Lena had her knees pulled up, wearing mismatched socks. Each held a cup of hot cocoa. And in the middle, Shadow sat upright, tongue slightly out, eyes forward like he was guarding something more than just the people beside him. The photo was pinned on the main bulletin board at the station by week's end. Nobody questioned how it got there. Officers passing by would glance at it longer than they'd admit. Recruits sometimes paused in front of it after tough shifts. It didn't need a plaque. The image said enough. That fall, during a town hall open forum, someone raised their hand during a lull. What happened to that dog, the one from last winter? The mayor blinked. He's retired, she said. Sort of. He works afternoons now. With a kid there were chuckles. But outside those walls, the town remembered. One evening, a boy about Lena's age, new to the district, recently moved in, waited near the school fence. Backpack on, face uncertain. It was nearly dusk. A pair of headlights flicked off, and a familiar black and tan figure trotted across the street toward him. Your shadow, the boy whispered. The dog tilted his head, then sat beside him, waiting. Minutes later, Mark's cruiser pulled up. No questions, no introductions, just safety. The boy got home that night. Word spread. And so, the program grew not through grants or headlines, but through whispers on sidewalks and quiet nods at diner counters. Kids started leaving treats in their jacket pockets, hoping for a visit. Parents watched from porches, hearts a little steadier when a certain pair of paws passed by. Shadow was never flashy. He didn't perform tricks. He didn't bark on command. He simply showed up, stayed, and left quietly. The week before Christmas, the mayor visited Mark's house to deliver a commendation. A fancy letter in an envelope with gold trim. Mark accepted it with a tired smile. After she left, he placed it in the kitchen drawer next to old receipts and spare keys. But the plaque, that stayed on the wall, right above the fireplace. And the photo, the one with the three of them on the porch, got framed and hung in the station lobby for every visitor to see. Some nights, Lena would sit beside Shadow and whisper stories only he heard. About school, about fear, about dreams. He'd blink slowly, lean into her hand, and breathe steady. One night, she asked, "Do you miss being a hero?" Shadow just lay his head in her lap and closed his eyes. That was answer enough. Because in this house, he wasn't a war dog, a survivor, or a headline. He was family. And sometimes that's the loudest kind of legacy a dog can leave one that doesn't bark, but simply stays. So if you've ever been loved by a dog like that, if you've ever found safety in the weight of a silent companion beside you, what's your story with a loyal pet? Let us know in the comments. And if Shadow's journey moved you even a little, help us tell more stories like his. Subscribe to German Shepherd Stories because loyalty deserves to be remembered.